Hello, this is Joseph with Marketing Matters with WEO Media. Today, I have my good friend, Terre Harris, who somehow made OSHA compliance entertaining. I don't know how, but we're going to find out. As CEO of Harris Biomedical since 1989, Terry has managed to turn the soul-crunching world of regulatory compliance into something dental and medical professionals can actually tolerate, and dare we say, even enjoy. With his theater background, I want to know more about that, and the radical belief that learning should involve laughter. He's transformed compliance training from bureaucratic torture into sessions that people can actually remember afterwards. Over 235,000 healthcare professionals have experienced Terry's unique brand of regulatory education, and more than 10,000 practices trust him to keep them on the right side of OSHA, HIPAA, and health department inspectors. He's the guy you call when you get that terrifying citation in the mail, and somehow he's not only going to help you fight it, but it'll probably make you chuckle while dueling. So in a world where compliance expert usually translates into a person that will bore you to tears, oh, not so with Terre Harris. Terry, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for asking me to be here. I'm tickled to death, Joseph, to participate, and I appreciate the introduction. It is one of the things that I think when we talk about OSHA and HIPAA or anything regulatory,
Mm-hmm.
a fun topic. And to be very honest with you, if I couldn't laugh or laugh with the people that are in the class, I wouldn't want to be there either. It's, it's not an exciting topic, and rarely is it a first choice of people. But we try to make it fun. We really do.
It's just so uncommon, and obviously one of the many reasons, besides your ability to be so accurate in a world that requires accuracy. I just don't know how you make something so enjoyable. What is this background in theater? You mentioned something about a thesis short of a master's in theater?
Yes, I when I was younger, much younger, obviously, I wanted to be in the world of cinema. Back when I was young, television was still black and white, uh,
Mm.
and I thought that was going to be a medium that is going to really be fun to be. I wanted to be an actor. I had a bit of a music background, and I wanted to do that. And I thought the theater would be perfect. I went to the University of Washington and got the undergraduate degree in drama in the theater, and decided to take it to the master's level. At the end of the master's program, I met my wife and decided that maybe that was a better road to travel than the theater. And by that time, I'd grown a bit weary of the theater and
Mm.
wanted to do something a little more productive. And
Mm.
ultimately, it ended in this. And I'm tickled
I'll
to death.
be.
And the whole idea that I have and that we have in this company is that if you can laugh while you learn, you're going to remember it longer. And that's something my mom and my dad told me when we were, dirt farmers in Wyoming as a kid. And we had a happy family. My family is happy. And so we try to translate and take that with us when we're trying to teach people something that they probably don't want to sit and listen to start with.
Mm.
That's
And
kind of
that's so
that's the
true.
thought.
Wow, that's clearly been some of the secret sauce in your success. I mean, and you started doing this not as a kid. You built this company when you already had success under your belt. You were already 50 by the time you built this.
Yes, I was. It was a bit of a surprise when I came home and explained to Barb, my wife, I'm going to close this company we have and I'm going to start a new one. And here's what we're going to do. And thank the good Lord that she had a sense of humor and patience. We were able to put it together. I could not have done it without her. I can tell you, she worked
Wow.
alongside me for a number of years and finally retired. And she's at home now. And she is happy, I think, that I'm here and she's at home. So I'm not in her way. As I mentioned to you a minute ago, just by interjection here, we're celebrating our 60th anniversary here in a couple of months, and it's been absolutely one of the best rides I've ever
Oh,
conceived.
oh, congratulations.
Oh,
My
thank you.
gosh. You'll have to clear out a stadium in Washington State somewhere to fit all the people that you know and that know you. We're talking how in the world 235,000 people
Mhm.
that you have trained in your seminars. That is like filling a football stadium twice a year, Terry. I mean, in all that you've done, what do you think is the most common misconception that you see your practices have about OSHA and HIPAA?
It's actually a situation today that has morphed into what it is, because back when we got started, back in 1989, the whole idea of OSHA, HIPAA wasn't even around at the time, and OSHA was fairly new. It started in 1970, and the whole idea was, and the history was, and the stories were, that they were big bad guys that are going to come in, they're going to close your office down. There were stories, almost all of them were not specific, or pardon me, not true, about the
Yeah.
amounts of the penalties, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the long and the short of it was that the OSHA entity had a reputation that preceded it, and it wasn't good. And it was pretty much built on a hearsay, and I think this is what happened type of thing. And so when we got involved in it, we understood that it was almost a thing where it was the doctors against the world of compliance and regulation. The reputation that OSHA had, true or false, preceded it. And so there was always a negative when the knock on the door happened or the letter came. And the goal that we have is absolutely the same as what OSHA has, and that is that the employees have a safe workplace. We have found that, and we've been able to explain to our clients that the inspectors are just doing their job. They're not out to get somebody. Almost always the reason in the OSHA world that they are being inspected is because there's been a complaint, almost always as a result of a disgruntled employee. And the
Oh,
inspectors now understand that. And
yeah.
they'll give you the benefit of the doubt if you take the time to be straight with them and be honest and welcome them into the office and recognize that they don't have anything personal against you. They're just doing the assignment of their job. And over the years, I think that attitude on both ends of the scale has improved. I think that
Uh,
while the offices really don't want the OSHA guy to walk in or lady to walk in, they know that it's their job, just as their job is to fix the teeth in the mouth of their patients. And it's one of those things I think that both ends understand each other now, wherein before they just didn't.
that's interesting. Yes. I was consulting during those years when HIPAA struck fear into the hearts of all my clients.
Mhm.
Honestly, the misconception was that they were going to walk in the door tomorrow before we were even prepared or knew what HIPAA was.
Right.
Then the reality that I think back then the state of Utah had 3 OSHA inspectors,
Mhm.
and we have one of the largest, open pit
Right.
copper mines in the world. So they're pretty busy. I don't think dentistry is at the top of their list. But the fact that it's there means that we can be assured that, the workplace is safe.
Yeah, and I think that one of the other things a lot of people don't understand is you mentioned the construction side. OSHA has a general kind of category for businesses and healthcare, and a completely separate category for construction.
I see.
They still have the basic rules of trying to have and ensuring a safe workplace. But you'll see our inspectors walking around on construction sites all the time to make
Mhm.
sure, because it is a dangerous
Yeah.
situation in dentistry, or again, or in medicine. Almost always the visit is a result of a complaint. OSHA just doesn't have the personnel to have as many inspectors in the dental and medical fields as they do, say, in construction or something a lot more hazardous. And by the way, you're from Utah and I was from Wyoming. One of the things a lot of people don't know is that the most dangerous categories that OSHA deals with isn't construction or sea or medicine, it's agriculture. People are dealing with large animals, huge
Mm.
pieces of machinery. There's very little education that goes on. It's usually a family kind of thing, unless it's a
Mhm.
very, very large kind of entity. The whole idea, the number of serious injuries in that field are huge as a result of that. Medicine and dentistry are certainly a higher risk than normal simply because of the nature of the beast. And I love the industry because the people, especially in the dental industry where we are, it's almost like a family thing. They're always friendly. They're the smile industry and they carry that forward. And I think also the inspectors understand that when they come in. Almost every one of those inspectors has sat in a dental chair at one point or another.
That's true.
And so they it's more on a personal basis very often in terms of the understanding and the willingness to be friendly. And we just tell our clients, when they knock on the door or when they get summoned for whatever by letter, just say, come on in, let's get a cup of coffee. How can I help you? Both of them are at sea. Normally, for example, the inspector that comes into a dental office is not an inspector that's been assigned to only deal with dentistry. They could be coming off of a road crew, a construction site, out of the agricultural industry, and they're being reassigned for that particular assignment in the dental industry. So they're walking into an office very often, at least, years ago, it's a little more knowledgeable.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the inspectors were at sea just as much as office manager or the doctors were as well. So both area had a time in the early days, and I say early days of when we became involved, where neither one understood really the role or the background of the other. And it was a defensive conversation. I don't think it's that way anymore now.
I'm glad to hear that. That really answers my next question about, for those who still have, fear struck into them when they hear OSHA inspection. It sounds like you just explained how they might best prepare for compliance inspection if that ever came to be. But it's changed a lot.
Well, it has in terms of changing and how might they prepare for it. I remember when we were started, there was a case of a doctor whose staff called me, and this was a dental office in another state, and the staff called and said, can you come and do a facility audit review, which is one of the things that we do for closely to comply with the rules, because we don't think that we're doing the things we should do in our office. And so would you mind coming in and taking a look at it? And I said, sure, thinking at the time that they'd probably had a conversation with the doctor that I'm going to be walking in and walking around the office. They had to let the doc know that I was going to show up. And so I'm walking around trying to look official, little checklist in my hand. And this doctor that I think probably played tackle for some NFL team up and said, you want to explain to me why you're walking the halls? And I said, yes. Understand, like I'm 5'6", I had on tippy toes. I explained that they had asked me, and he said, I'll tell you what, I'll deal with that crap when everybody else has to. And he says, so I'd just be real pleased if you'd leave. And I said, you got it. I mean, I'm looking up, I'm not looking to argue with that guy. So I left. That's phase one of the story. But the attitude was, I'd never been inspected before. I've been in practice a long time, and I'm just going to let it ride. And if it happens, it happens. And he made the comment, I'll deal with that crap when everybody else does. About a month and a half later, I get a call from it. And he said, Terry, could you come out and complete that review that you were starting? I said, sure. What's changed? He said, well, OSHA just walked in, and they're telling me that I need to have some help. And I said, so what you're telling me is everybody else have to deal with this stuff. Is that it? And long story short, he became a really good client, but it shows the difference at the time. Nowadays, you would never run somebody else out of, who's trying to help you, because people understand it. They understand you need to follow the rules. And going back to your point, the best way to be comfortable is to be compliant. If you're doing things right, you invite them in for a cup of coffee any day of the week. If you aren't, understanding that OSHA and HIPAA compliance has never been a primary effort on anybody's office. They're in dentistry or medicine or wherever. And so compliance is almost always an add-on, or it was in the old days. Now we see that people are making it very, very primary, and we're seeing a lot safer attitude. I think more people are having fun doing it, because if the boss believes it, and the boss buys into the program, the staff will, everything else turns into a smile, and it really works well that way. I think.
I'm glad to hear that it's not as adversarial
Yeah.
as it began.
Yeah.
And so much of that came from misunderstandings and
Mhm.
misconceptions about what their role was and that part of government as a whole. I think every dentist that's ever graduated wants his office to be a safe place for his team. What are some of the most common infractions, if you will, that doctors really just don't think about?
OSHA has a top 10 list
Do
that
they?
you deal with, yeah, and it pretty much deals with all industries within that top 10 list. And one
Uh-huh.
of them is fail to have a basic training situation. Have your annual training. The bloodborne pathogen, for example, was the first OSHA regulation that specifically said you had to do it annually. It's always been
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
train staff at the time of hire and then kind of whenever you want to. And when the bloodborne pathogen came in back in 91 and became effective in 92, all of a sudden that whole scenario changed and people realized that they got to have training. But still, one of the most common citations is failure to have the training that's required by the regulations. And that's the
Mhm.
same under HIPAA as well, even though the HIPAA rule is a little bit different about how often you should have the training. The
Uh-huh.
other thing is failure to have the written policies and procedures that you have to have. Every one of the OSHA programs, the accident prevention or illness and injury, the bloodborne pathogen standard, the hazard communication standard, every one of those has a requirement to have a written policies and procedures that are tailored to the practice as it operates. In the state that we're in Washington, for example, a generic fill in the blanks kind of written program is not acceptable. A general outline with specifics is to have just a fill in the blank thing. And what we find a lot of times, and this is what the inspectors will find, people will buy a book, from an agency or an association that is fill in the blanks and never fill in the blanks. They just buy the book, throw it on the shelf, and then they get inspected. And so the training is important. Safety meetings is another thing. You don't have to have a long, drawn out safety meeting. You could do
Mhm.
in the dental industry, you could do it in a morning huddle, basically. Talk about it.
Mhm.
Everything
Okay.
okay? Anybody see anything that isn't? Do we have any problems any place? Deal with it like that. And then once a month, have a regular meeting and go over it. So I think that getting back to your question, the most common thing is that, first of all, it's never a priority. Everything else
Mhm.
is always first. Even go to the national conventions or the state conventions. It is rare that they're going to have a speaker on OSHA. Everybody talks
Right.
about how important it is, but it's rare that now I've spoken, throughout the country at various places and study clubs and so forth. But it's one of the things that just doesn't have a priority. And when that happens, then little things fall apart, and all of a sudden you get a letter or somebody knocks on the door.
I've said more than once that entropy is alive and well in dentistry, and
Sure.
any system that you leave alone,
Yep.
untouched,
Yep.
unpolished long enough will return to its original chaotic state.
You what?
And that's so true for OSHA and HIPAA.
It really is. It's one, like I say, it's never listed as a priority as a state convention.
No.
I remember going to a Denver convention several years ago. One of the speakers was an attorney, and in the promo, it said that he was going to talk about compliance. And so I sat through whatever else that he was talking about, waiting for him to talk about compliance. And basically, and I'm not stretching this one word, he says something along the line, it's really important to comply with the rules too. And moved right on, and so I think one of the things, Joseph, that really is an issue that you struck on when you introduced, it's not a fun topic. It
Right.
doesn't have splash. It doesn't have the music in the background, and the flowers on it.
Yeah.
It's a cool subject. And so that's why we use a lot of humor. We have a lot of real stories. Some of them you just shake your head at, and we use that a lot. And I can remember telling stories, and people will laugh right out loud at what had happened and actually happened in a dental office. And I know every one of them are thinking, well, that would never happen in our office, for crying out loud.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
it
for
probably
sure,
would,
for sure. With all those stories, Terry, you got to tell us one. You got to tell us a good one. We need to laugh here.
One of my favorite is that, like I say, I started the company 35 years ago. And so
Hmm.
one of the things that we've seen, and this year is actually the fourth generation of a family of dentists.
Oh
Back
my
in the day
goodness.
when we started, there was a dentist in Southwest Washington who was the grandpa, and
Mhm.
his son he was a client of ours, and his son bought the practice, and so that was number two. And then that doctor had a son who was ultimately went to college, and he recently took over the practice as the son of the third generation down.
Yeah.
And so we've run into that. But anyhow, one of my favorite is that this young doctor called and he said, Terry, my dad's never used your services, but I really think we'd like you to come and do a review and tell us how we're doing. And I said, that I'm tickled to death. So I go out and I do that. And he said, at the time, he said, I bought the company from dad and he's working 2 or 3 days a week. Could you tell him that he has to wear gloves? And I said, yes. I will. Now, the bloodborne pathogen, in 92, 91 and 2, I mean, that's the first time the law required wearing
Right.
gloves,
I remember that.
personal
Mhm.
protective equipment. Well, dad, when he ran the practice, that was before bloodborne pathogen. And so I said, would you tell dad he has to wear gloves? And I said, okay, I will. So I'm doing the review and dad's there, delightful guy, excellent dentist. And finally, when we were kind of alone, I said, doc, one of the things you got to do, I said, is that you got to start wearing gloves now. And he said, Terry, I lose a tactile connection. The glove, that's nuts. I'm just not going to wear gloves. I said, well, let's kind of look at it this way. You don't own this practice anymore. The kid in the other room owns a practice and you're working for him. And I
Mhm.
don't think you really want OSHA to come in and slap him because you won't follow the rules.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll wear the stupid gloves. And I said, great. Fast forward a year. And the young doc calls me. He says, Terry, could you come out and do the annual training for us? I said, absolutely. And he said, also, dad's still working a couple of days. He said, could you tell him that he's got to change gloves? And I said, yep, we'll do that too. So it was one of those things where not only did the baton with the rules, and uh, we've had we've had a number of things like that. We had one time one of the doctors who really didn't want this to happen, but the staff wanted it. About twice during the training, broke out into her with her own words of the tunes of Gilligan's Island during the training session. With my background in the theater, I thought, well, no, she's never going to make it on stage. Yeah, but I just sat back. I was dumbfounded. I don't know. And she got done, and we said, "Okay, we'll move right on." And it was 2 or 3 times like that. But we had fun, and if you let it take hold of you, then you could go outside and beat your head on the side of a wall. But
Oh man.
fun with it, then you make it work.
Wow. So you actually offer practices with help to fight an OSHA citation at no extra charge.
That's right.
So basically, you're willing to go back in and battle for your clients.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely, absolutely.
what's the strangest citation you've ever seen?
The strangest one was all one that actually happened on the east side of the state of Washington. Remember, I said that earlier that the inspectors aren't assigned in the state to dentistry, or usually into most states, they just don't have the personnel. Washington has what is called a state plan, which means that the federal OSHA has approved an application by the state to have their own equivalent that is actually run by the state. And about half
Mhm.
the states around the country, I think it's 26 or 28 states, have their own federal OSHA approved state plan. And Washington does that. And in Washington, it's run by the Department of Labor and Industries, and it's called the Division of Occupational Safety and Health. Getting to the point is that this inspector had done a review. And remember that the inspector probably had never been in a dental office before to run a review, but it was a complaint that they were responding to, and it was absolutely clean. We had not only written the programs, we had done the facility review. It was one that we talked to as a model. Do it the way this office is doing it. It's great.
Mhm.
Where the inspector came in, checked on the complaint, found that it was false. It was just an unhappy ex-employee who kind of fired a shot across the bow, on leaving, and couldn't find anything. But the citation that they wrote with that there was no training program or procedures written for using personal instruments, such as nail files, fingernail clippers, and so forth. And of course, there's no law that says you got to have that unless somebody's going to grab a nail file and attack somebody with it, And so obviously, this inspector didn't have, she wanted to write something, but she had nothing to cite. So she had that. So she said, you have to have procedures. So I said, okay. So I wrote, because we had written the programs for this particular practice. So I wrote a 6-page policies and procedures on how to use a pair of scissors, nail file, a hammer, a pair of pliers, anything that had a sharp edge. I wrote a procedure on it. And I showed it to her and I said, will this work? She said, it works fine. And that was it. And that, now, that is still in our written program. So if you want to
Oh
know
my goodness.
how to use a nail file, we got it for you, So
You covered every base there, let me tell you.
I just,
Uh,
and I did it in kind of a subtle, sarcastic way,
yeah,
but the
yeah, yeah.
inspector, she just said, well, that works. So, so
They
we
they can see right through it.
to your point on representing or working with our clients in the event that they get cited, that's another item that there's a lot of stories about how big the fines are and how just devastating they can be and when they walk in.
Yeah.
Almost always in the old days when somebody got cited, they get an attorney. And I have absolutely nothing against attorneys. They're great when you need them, usually.
Sure.
But also that's a cost that I just felt, and a lot of times was one that the docs just didn't have to endure. What we do is when somebody comes to us and they want the written programs, then we have a very detailed questionnaire. That is, a matter of fact, in the state of Washington, a lot of our questions are on the questionnaires now in the Department of Health reviews that they do, and through the dental board. It's very detailed, and we tell people, you got to be honest here. It doesn't do you any good to paint this a color that it's not. And
Yeah.
so we write the programs, we tailor the written policies and procedures as is required by law to the activities of the practice. And then we train them on those rules. So we do the review, we write the programs, we train the staff so that they're prepared when somebody walks in. All they got to do is keep the thing current. That doesn't mean that something might happen wherein they're going to get investigated. And like I say, almost always, not every time, but almost always in the OSHA field, the review in the dental industry is as a result of a complaint. And it's very, very common that it's an ex-employee that is not happy about being an ex-employee, or they weren't happy with the things were going, whatever it was. So
Yeah.
what we do is we say, okay, if you get cited, first of all, welcome the inspector. They're at sea. They're just doing their job. Be friendly, get them in, get them out. That sort of approach, and be honest with them. And then once they get that list of any things that might be citable, then they contact us, and then they give us the authority to have conversation with the OSHA inspector, the division in this state of Labor and Industries. So we can not represent them in a legal stance because we're not attorneys and we never give legal advice, but we can help them write the response to the citation. This is why it happens, or this isn't what happens. Here's what it's going. We write it in the language that the inspectors don't have to try to decipher, and we write the letters for them. We go for our clients if that happens. We go to the meetings on their behalf, and if there's a cite-in, we appeal to have the fines reduced or dropped altogether. It's a thing that is just part of the package. Now, it doesn't happen a lot. Over the 35 years that we've probably had 15 that have happened. Not one of them, interestingly enough, not one of those 15 were a client at the time, but they got in trouble and they called us and became a client. And we were very successful on every one of them. And knock on wood, that way they didn't have to go to court. And our attitude has always been that if the inspector isn't happy or if the client wants to go to court, then get your attorney. And we are personally the best expert witness you're ever going to find because we were there from the get-go. We don't charge for that. We don't charge for emails and questions. We don't charge for telephone calls. Last year, we fielded just a few more than 8,000 emails and telephone calls. Now, if we were an attorney and we charged, for every 15 seconds, I'd be on the Riviera someplace having a martini, I think. But but we don't. We try to be sensitive to the cost. And here's something just for general conversation. We're in the process right now of taking a look at increasing the fees. And so
Hmm.
I'm really sensitive to what the docs have to pay just to set up a dental office, you know,
Right.
a lot of money. And so I don't want to be one of them that always comes back and says, well, I can do this, but it's going to cost you again. In looking at our fees for the OSHA program, for example, that includes the first time around the OSHA training as well on all the three of those
Hmm.
programs. Fee was, I think, $14.97. And so I'm thinking, when was the last time we actually raised that price? So I took out, I swear to God, I'm telling you the truth right now. Yesterday, I took out an invoice of 1992. 1992.
Hmm.
OSHA program and the training in 1992 was 1475, and
Oh
we
my
charge
God.
today 1492. So what you have,
Mm.
there was what, less than $20 increase over the
Yeah.
35 years, you know.
Wow.
So I told the staff from now on it's $30,000 a book. We're going to catch up. But when we
That'll make up for it.
what we lose in bulk, we'll gain on, whatever that old saying is.
Oh, man.
But it's one of the
Oh,
things
Terry.
we are sensitive about, and we try to
Yeah.
be.
Well, and you're just such a great partner for a dentist who wants to be able to sleep at night and do what he needs to do right and not have to worry about these regulatory requirements to run a practice. It shouldn't be that hard, right? It
Well,
shouldn't be that hard.
I agree. And one of the things, I wrote an article for the Academy of General Dentistry in Washington here a couple of years
Hmm.
ago entitled What I Did Learn in Dental School. And right at the top of the list was anything regulatory.
Hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
we'd have a course one or two. I've actually spoken a couple of times at the University of Washington School of Dentistry on stuff, but it's not what they're there for. They're there to be
No.
dentists.
Right.
We understand that. We help wherever we can. But I wrote another article that was who's calling the shots, because there's a lot of confusion on that with the CDC involved, the state OSHA, the federal OSHA, HIPAA, federal HIPAA, or privacy rules within the individual states. There's a lot of balls that are in the air. And I can see why people just throw up their hands and say, I got other things I have to do. And so what we've tried to do is come in, be the answer to some of the questions they don't even know about yet.
Right. That they don't even know about.
Mhm.
I know for a fact that you've created what's referred to as one of the industry's best HIPAA programs. What is the biggest challenge in translating government speak into something that a busy dental office can actually follow?
The HIPAA rule, is part of a much larger rule, and it is very long. There's something like 1,900 pages overall of the stuff that we had to go through ultimately to get to HIPAA in the early 2003 when the privacy rule
Hmm.
was adopted. It's not just the HIPAA rules or the OSHA rules. You got to remember that these rules are written by attorneys, and attorneys have their own attorney speak, and they will tell you how to sharpen a pencil 100 different ways in 100 different approaches. And so to answer your question, most people, when they pick up the rules, will read the rule until they find what they hope is the answer.
Mm.
When it comes to reading the regulations and the rules, we'll go through it from start, to finish, however long that is. And then we'll break it into chapters, just like the rules are. And then if you take a look at law, and this is being very general, but very often the law will refer to another part of the law someplace else in the law down there, and that'll refer to something before or something past. And all of a sudden, you've got this spider web that the general person will just throw their hands and just say, I really hope they don't walk in. So what
Right.
we do is we'll read it like I say, and then I go in and I read the law from the back forward, start at the back and work forward and get to the point where all the words come together, you see, at least in my
Okay.
opinion. And
Yeah.
so then we decipher that and try to translate what I call the legalese and the bureaucratese out and write the policies and procedures representing what the rules are so that the actual client can read it and that somebody who isn't a college graduate, like a dental assistant or the front office people very often aren't, can understand it. It doesn't do you any good to have written policies and procedures if you don't have a clue what the heck it says. And so our written programs, and you talk about the quality of the program, is that
Hmm.
we've covered every detail in the rule. And every piece of it is written in a way where just about anybody can understand what it is they have to do and what the rules are.
Why would you want to reinvent the wheel when an expert has already done all of that for you and can explain to you what it really means so you can actually be in compliance?
That's certainly the question that brought us into business.
Yeah,
You know, I
yeah,
mean,
it is.
I remember when we started, I started alone. And I have to tell you, Joseph, I had another company, like I said, and we were doing pretty well. And then we start this one just from scratch. And there was not another company that did this at all in the country. And there were days where in my office, I had a desk, a table, and a phone. And I was sure more often than not that the phone wasn't working, you know, so when I went out and I wrote the first program I wrote was actually an infectious waste program in King County, Washington. I remember one of the doctors that I talked to said, "Can you also write our hazard communication program?" And I said, "Sure, absolutely." Now understand, this is before computers. Okay,
Yeah,
this is when everything was hand typed. And I
yeah,
remember my
yeah.
dad on the farm had told me once, if you want to do something bad enough and they ask if you can, tell them you can. And by the time they find out you can't, you'll be able to. And so,
I love that
and
philosophy.
I'm 12 years old walking around shaking my head. What did you just say? But as it turned out, they said, can you also write the hazard communication program? I had never heard that term in my life. So I had to
Hmm.
go to a library. And so finally I put it together and then going to go for a few months, move forward a few months. And some doctors called me and said, can you talk to our study club and explain them how you do this? And I,
Hmm.
sure. So
Hmm.
that's how I got into talking to more than one doctor at a time.
Yeah.
So I said, sure. So I got in, I explained what we do. And one of the doctors said, well, we could do that ourselves. And we said, absolutely, you could. Absolutely. You would tell everybody,
Hmm.
there's a
Hmm.
regulation, here's what you got to do, and here's what you need.
Hmm.
And he said, we could do it ourselves. And the doctor who invited me in said, we tried that and we put over 40 hours in trying to write this program.
Oh,
And when we got done, we didn't know if we were done.
right.
I pointed out,
Like,
and he said, we didn't know all the questions, so how could we know all the answers? And
right.
that's where we fit in. If we don't have the answer already, our answer is just you go ahead and be a dentistry. You stay doing what you're doing. We'll do the legwork. We're not going to charge for this. We'll do the legwork. You do the dentistry, and we'll get you on a plane where you're safe and you have a safe office.
In that very arena of infectious control, infectious waste management, I mean, you practically predate all the requirements in some ways. What was that like trying to help doctors and their teams understand that that was something they needed to be concerned about when they seemed to have no regard for that level of care?
Well, the bloodborne pathogen standard was the regulation that OSHA adopted back
Hmm.
in 91, became effective in 92, 1991 and 92. That really changed not just the playing field, but the rules and everything for dentistry and for medicine. It was primarily written for the medical side. And as a matter of fact, in the bloodborne pathogen rule, dentistry is only mentioned a couple of times. But dentistry has body fluids in front of them with almost every procedure, where in medicine doesn't. With that rule, a lot of the old timers just said, I'll sell. I don't understand why we have to do all of these things. So the opportunity there was absolutely raw to provide the instruction and the education for people who were thirsty for it, because they had a new rule in front of it. Nobody was explaining it. OSHA basically had adopted it and said, do it. Even their own inspectors were on a solid ground when it came to explaining it. So we took it and we said, okay, this is not only an opportunity for the company to really get involved in something we like to do, but it's an excellent opportunity to educate people on something that they absolutely need to know. And it's not
Yeah.
something that you can just
Yeah.
let float, because you will end up being in trouble. Somebody will get hurt, somebody will be injured. You just got to follow. And so our approach was, again, let's make it fun. This is something you have to do. And I can remember, the old thing about get more bees with honey than you do with salt, or some old thing that my granddad used to say. But the idea is if you can make them want to learn, they will.
Yeah. Yep.
And so we would have people introduce kind of like you did earlier. Here's a guy that not only will educate you, but I think you're going to walk away enjoying it. And we get that comment all the time, Joseph.
Oh,
Gee,
that's
I never
great.
thought that I'd want to sit and hear something like
Yeah.
this. So this is the most fun we've ever had. All our trainers get that, yeah, a lot, because we don't take ourselves seriously at all, but we take what we do very seriously. And we have fun doing it. And one of our trademarks is that, yeah, we'll go see. This will be something that will be not only educational, but we'll have fun learning it.
Is it any wonder that more than 10,000 practices consider you their partner in an area where they've got to be on the cutting edge of compliance if they're going to do a good job for both their patients and the team?
One of the things that we never lose sight of is that, and you just used the word team, and that's a word that you might hear from time to time in the smaller groups in the medical side, the
Mhm.
surgical team or the whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
In dentistry, everybody's a team member.
Yeah.
And from the front office to the whoever that's in there. Obviously, there's always a leader to the team, and that'll be usually the doctor, who's listening very closely, usually to a hygienist,
Hmm.
kind of the rule followers in the dental industry. But they're a team, and we've always felt that we can communicate best and they can learn best if we are a member of their team. And so that's kind of how we've always approached it. And that's why we really like the in-person sitting in the office, talking in the training session. That's why when COVID hit, we said we can still be a member of the team. And we started using the Zoom. So
Hmm.
now,
Hmm.
just like I'm looking at you and you're looking at me, we are a member of the team in their office. We just happen to be on the screen. And from my end, I can always tell if you're falling asleep, while I'm talking, and I will make fun of you in a heartbeat. So, so I've always said, if I've got to stay awake through this, so do you. Bring your roots.
Oh, Terry, thank you so much for your time. How can people get a hold of you? What's your preference?
I can give you a phone number. We have Harris Biomedical on the website. And by the way, we're just updating our website now with the whole new logo and a whole bunch of stuff that's really exciting. It's Harris Biomedical or www.harrisbiomedical.net. As simple as that. My personal email, and I invite anybody to use it, is T Harris, T for Terry, T Harris at harrisbiomedical.net. And the phone number, long distance, 866-548-2468. Put the bill on us and give us a call, and we'd do it in a heartbeat. Don't ever be shy. Don't ever be embarrassed about a question. Any conversations we have are confidential between us and the people that call. We do facility reviews. We can do those virtually. We do them all over the country or in person, whatever happens to be geographically close. But the reviews that we do are so similar to the investigations that OSHA does or OCR does. For everything is absolutely confidential. If the doc doesn't want the staff to know, just let us know. He can break the news or she can break the news. But most doctors aren't like that. They love to have a third
Yeah.
person deliver the message. So
Yeah. Yeah.
call anytime. The only time that I probably would be slow to answer is if the Seattle Mariners are playing or if the Seahawks are playing.